Well, good morning. It's Wednesday, the 7th of December. We're heading towards Christmas. This is Mirador Television broadcasting from the White Hart Hotel in Lewes, East Sussex, in the country of the United Kingdom still. Talk about Christmas, talk about unions, talk about striking, talking about making it a Grinch Christmas, and you've got it in one. And I am sorry, but I do not have any sympathy for the unions whatsoever, because they are living in dreamland. We have lived through a very, very prosperous 10 years from 2010 to 2020. And then, through no fault of anybody's, disaster struck, and the whole country had to grind to a halt. We had to dip into our overloaded coffers to keep things going. But nobody in the unions, anyway, and many of those people out on the street have not realized that the good times have come to an end. We are now going to have to start to pay our way. We are going to have to start to work again. No more working from home, so you've got 4 days off and 1 day on. It's now got to be 5 days of hard graft from everybody, even to justify the high salaries and the high prices and the high fees that are being charged in the corporate sector. Because inevitably what's going to happen is that the taxes will have to go up. And we will be back to each individual paying 40% again instead of 20%. But nobody seems to have come to realize that that's what's happened and what is happening. And it's not likely to right itself for 3 or 4 years. So trying to bring back what we've lost in one fell swoop and without any sort of effort is nonsense. And it's about time that the unions understood that. But if the unions are, as they claim, driven by their members and what they want, then it's about time that the whole populace came to realize there's no free ride. We are going to have to pay for what we get from now on. And it's going to be tough. And it's going to be hard. And going on strike, particularly at Christmas, is ridiculous. Well, let's take a look at the newspaper headlines. And good morning, Max. I'm sorry to drag a young man like you into a situation like this, but I'm afraid that it exists.
Well, that's fine. Good morning. I already know what's all going on. But I will say, when you were doing your morning rant, I will say, when you said, through no fault of anyone's, we had to lock down the country, I would disagree with that.
Yes, I know you do. You and Liza have very specific thoughts on that. Personally, I do think that we suffered a viral infection and it killed lots of people. How it was dealt with would be open to debate, but it happened. It was a force of nature, and nature has a habit of letting us go so far and then coming back and biting us really nastily in the ass, and that's what she did that time. Anyway, we'll debate that some other time. Let's take a look at the newspaper headlines. The Daily Telegraph: ambulance unlikely if you fall, the elderly are told. Well, now, it is interesting, I find that, because I fall from time to time. And I've got a little red thingy in my apartment that I can call, and it goes through, and some nice lady comes on and says, "Are you okay?" And I say, "I'm lying on the floor. I'm helpless, but I'm okay." "Okay," she says. And away she goes. But quite seriously, the ambulance staff are vital. And the 2 times that I have had to ask for proper help is paramedics have turned up in an ambulance quite quickly. And they have been really very efficient indeed. And I'm sorry to see those people are likely to go on strike. There was some talk, which seems to have gone away, that the army will take over the duties of ambulance driving. Whether that's a good solution or a bad solution, I have no idea. The only thing is, I think that the ambulance service needs to be kept going.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the army driving the ambulances is unfortunately necessary. I mean, but come on, ambulance is unlikely if you fall, elderly are told. That is ridiculous.
Yes, it is. It is. But I mean, actually, what I hope is that all those people in the medical, we have, oh, the NHS, bang, 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 and so on. You're crap. You're absolute crap, NHS. You're a broken organisation. The fact that you've got people who know what they're doing is one thing, but your organisation stinks. It really stinks. And I would appeal, not that anybody's going to listen to me, but I would appeal to medical workers not to go along with your unions, not to strike. Because what you're going to do is you are going to hit the most vulnerable in our society. And if you can go to sleep at night with that on your conscience, God bless you. And welcome to 2023, where the life is going to be very different. And if you can't get used to that, you're better off quitting your job, right? And then by June, you see what it's like to have some of these things taken away. Right? Oh, I had a lovely time there. The Times. Paramedics urge not to risk lives with a strike. Who's urging them?
Everyone?
Bosses will plead with, it's the NHS people again, the ambulance bosses. And they're the people, I think, that are creating part of this problem anyway. With it become a monolithic bureaucracy that doesn't really know what it's doing and needs sorting out. But it's, what I've been saying is, you mention reform to either a politician, a civil servant, a leader of a quango, and they shake with fright. Absolutely, because you're talking about taking money out of their pockets.
Well, but I'm going to be voting for Reform UK, formerly the Brexit Party, co-run by Nigel Farage. I can't remember the leader's name of it. He's a really nice guy. Yeah, I mean, that's who I'll be voting for, Reform UK. I think they're very good. They're a small independent party. They're not going to get any power, major power, that is. They might get a few seats, but I mean, I'm certainly not voting for the big guys.
No, I'm not either. You're quite right. In fact, that's a good way of establishing a protest vote. I mean, the option that I have is to spoil my ballot. I mean, people say, "Oh, spoil your ballot, you're wasting it." No, you're not, because spoiled ballots are counted.
Not voting is wasting your vote. Spoiling the ballot isn't wasting.
No, because what you're doing is you're protesting at the people that are putting themselves up to be our leaders, if you like, voted our leaders. Okay, right. What does the Times say? Ambulance bosses will plead with unions to protect heart attack and stroke patients amid fears they could suffer as workers plan to go on strike. There is still no agreement over emergencies that could pose a risk to life if not treated quickly, and ministers are considering whether the army needs to be called in, the paper reports. So it's gone from government is considering bringing in an army now to, well, we've had a rethink, but we now sit back to thinking that way. Dilly-dally. Make a bloody decision and stick to it. I'm sorry, Rishi, but your lot are no better than the lot that have gone before you and the lot that are against you. You are all worthless. 650 MPs, and not one of you is worth tuppence. Not one. And that's from the top to the bottom. Yeah. I hope that we get a new breed standing for things like the Reform Party.
Yeah, and with the NHS, within the last 5 years, the majority of my experiences with the NHS have been bad. Even before COVID. I unfortunately know multiple people now, who have been killed through the NHS because of incompetence, and it's gone to court because of it.
Well, I'm not going to get into the competence issue, but all I would say to you is that the NHS as an organisation is broken. It needs reform. But I had about a year ago. I had the mayor of New Haven on, a very nice lady, and she said, I said to her about reform, and she said, she's quite a young lady actually. I mean, I think she's in her 30s, and she said, I've come into politics not by choice, but because I had to. And she said, I don't think there will be reform in all the time that I'm in politics, and I've got a life ahead of me, and she's quite right. But unless we get reform, unless reform comes in, we are going to struggle now from year to year to year to year, listening to the old platitudes while the globe goes down the tube, and individually we actually screw ourselves, to put it bluntly. And in some ways, I hope I don't live to be 100, is because I don't really want to see it. It is very sad to see what's happened. And to be quite honest with you, a lot of it is because we got lazy and we put our hands in technology. And technology has no soul. It has no spirit. It doesn't look at us and say you're a nice guy or you're not a nice guy. It just you're a number. You're what are you? You're a digit. Right, okay, Metro. Moan Alone, right? The Metro is going after Baroness Moan. I didn't know how to pronounce that yesterday, Mone, but it seems that it is pronounced Moan. And she is not only she's been suspended from the Lords for a couple of months while she's investigated. But not only did she lobby to get a contract for her own company, but apparently she also lobbied for a company that it turns out that her husband is an executive of. Now, if you talk about internal influence and corruption, this is naughty. This is very naughty. The Guardian. Oh, the Guardian carries on with that. Moan lobbied for second firm with secret links to her husband. Yeah, they picked up on that.
Who is this? I've never heard of
her. Well, actually, one of the things that is just silly. I mean, to be quite honest with you, I wouldn't want to go to the House of Lords. Not that I'm likely to, but I really wouldn't want to because it doesn't mean anything anymore. Basically, what happens is the governments thank people who have supported them. This woman had a lingerie empire, which she built herself. Give her credit for that. So she was offered a peerage as thanks because she supported the government. Now, when she's in the Lords, she used her position to quietly and secretly push her own companies and those of her friends and her husband and so on and so forth. So, no, I forget how many people there are in the Lords now. I think there are more than in the Commons. So I'm not surprised you haven't heard of her. But this is her background. In other words, she's a knicker lady. Made a fortune selling knickers. And she's one of our leaders. Don't worry, we're in safe hands. dear.
A politician legislating things to help their own business. I am shocked. That is shocking. That is the most shocking story this year. A politician lobbying for themselves.
Oh, I mean, it happens all the time.
I know. I don't know why this is a major story because, like, it happened again. Sure, it should be in the news and stuff, but like, what?
Well, actually, when I do some corporate training in various emerging democracies and economies, and the one thing that I warn them about is the lobbyist. It is a very refined sector of our economy. They don't make a big fuss and dance about who they are. Normally, they're ex-MPs or ex-civil servants and so on and so forth, with access to being able to influence people in Parliament, legislators, and they work very hard at it. I mean, actually, a prime example is lobbyists working on behalf of the tobacco companies. Everybody knows that cigarettes kill. but the lobbyists keep coming up with all sorts of
No, but
facts and
the
figures.
scientists at the time said smoking is good for you. So you just if you trusted the science, that was a bad thing at the time. Because obviously, I mean, everyone in my family has been smoking a hell of a long time. My great granddad smoked for 82 years.
Yeah.
Well, 81 years. He died at 92, and he started smoking at 11.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nobody knows exactly the effects. There's no question, though, that tobacco smoking does speed up the process in a lot of people.
Well, I will say, if he smoked for 81 years. If he had never touched a cigarette in his life, he would have lived well. He probably would have been the oldest person in the country.
Well, maybe or maybe not. But
Well, he died from smoking. He got COPD from smoking so much.
Yeah, and that's not a nice thing to have.
No, it's not. There are multiple family members that have had
that. Okay, in the Financial Times, the Prime Minister is under pressure to accelerate anti-strike legislation. Once again, Tory MPs, the tail is trying to wag the dog. In this case, I suppose that there is some merit to it. The paper says Britain is facing the largest wave of industrial action since the tail end of Margaret Thatcher's reign as PM, and unions have accused ministers of wrecking deals. On the other hand, ministers have been accused of not being strong enough in standing up to the unions, and I think that there's a lot to be said for that as well. The Daily Mail, right? Labour in hock to the unions, crippling Britain. Labour.
What is this photo of King Charles, by the way? This is a ridiculous photo.
Well, it says see pages 4 and 5. You've got the paper there. You can take a look. In the meantime, unions are giving the Labour Party millions of pounds in donations as industrial action continues. The paper says data released by the Electoral Commission revealed unions such as Unite and the GMP gave Labour £1.6 million in the third quarter, just in the third quarter of 2022.
Wait, sorry, say that again.
The Electoral Commission, which oversees election issues, says that unions such as Unite and GMB gave Labour that's just two unions, gave 1.6 million in the third quarter of 2022. So what's the third quarter? It's June, July, August, is it? October, November, December. Yes, June, July, August. During June, July, and August, they gave the Labour Party 1.6 million quid.
How much did they give the Conservative Party?
Well, we don't know, but the chances are that well, yes and no. I'm quite sure they gave some, because all these organisations like to cover their losses. So they give a lot of money to Labour. Labour doesn't win, but they want to make sure that they've still got influence in the winning party, which let's assume is the Conservative Party and not the Liberals. So they will have secretly been tucking money into their coffers as well. It's all got to be sorted out. It really has. It's we are a third world country. That's what we are. The UK's Strep A fight back may need extra antibiotics. Now, you've got some thoughts about this Strep A, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, what was it yesterday in the It was having to give antibiotics to children in schools. Why do we need to mass medicate children? And we need to stop doing that. We were always giving them ADHD drugs and all sorts of medication to try and make them normal children. I think a lot of this can go unmedicated to a certain extent, obviously. I don't really trust this Strep A thing because it's constantly, children are dying. I think it's somewhat propaganda. I think this is going to be like COVID. Think of the children. But with COVID, it was, think of grandma. It's always...
Well, yes, I agree with you that the authorities pull on the heartstrings. And, I mean, this is slightly off-piste. But there's a local story of a young child having been knocked down by a car and killed. And the first thing is our precious sweet princess is what the parents say. They've all got a precious sweet princess, right? If parents are so great, why haven't we got an association for precious sweet princesses? Is because suddenly they come into the limelight and their child was a precious sweet princess. I don't want a daughter. I didn't have a daughter. She's a pretty good daughter. I mean, I'm very lucky to have a superb daughter, actually. But I never ever thought of her as a precious sweet princess, for God's sake. How silly it is to use that emotive term. Oh dear, she'll be missed. Of course she'll be missed. She's your daughter. But I would like to think that most children are naughty, mischievous. My daughter tried to get away with as much as she possibly could. But the interesting thing is, she went to boarding school in Northern Ireland, and on weekends she was able to come home, and she brought with her other students who were in the boarding house, and they asked if they could come back with her because they wanted to be with the parents for a weekend who actually had the temerity to ground their daughter. We would ground my daughter. In other words, you can't be out after 8 o'clock, or you can't go to this party, or you can't go to that party as a punishment. And they all wanted to have a parent who did that.
I don't think that's true.
It is true. I am telling you now.
True.
Are you calling me a liar, young man? Are you calling me a liar? Come on. Are you calling me a liar? This is my personal experience, right? Am I a liar?
I don't think there are many.
Listen, Max. You've got to open up your mind. When you talk to somebody who says this is my experience, either they're a liar in your head, or you've got to say is right. I've got to consider this, right?
Okay. Well,
right.
I'll sure. I've just never come in my.
I've met your mother. She keeps a very tight rein on you, and you love it. You're a very tight family.
Doesn't.
She does. You don't even know it, do you? Right. Okay. Enough of that. King is egg again. Well, that's somebody threw an egg at the king. Step A took away my princess. There we go. Right here we go. Is look at the child is obese, Step A took away my princess, declares the Daily Mirror. The paper says the father of Stella Lily McCorkindale, age 5, who died in intensive care, said his daughter touched all their hearts on the ICU ward. Health chiefs also asked all the victims' classmates to go on antibiotics as a precaution, the paper reports. So she was being used, wasn't she? Well, I mean, what you're saying is that this widespread use of antibiotics is suspect.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know if you've ever looked at the studies of antibiotics. They're actually losing their effect. I'm sure you've heard about this. Because people are using antibiotics so often, they're losing their effect. And the viruses are actually building strains that are immune to antibiotics.
Oh, absolutely.
So why do we need to keep medicating en masse? It's a terrible idea. Medicate when you're ill. What is this medicate en masse thing?
Well, I suppose that the argument is that some of these things prevent you getting the therapy in the first place. Unfortunately, I am not medically competent to know whether that's right or wrong. So therefore, I think that you're right to challenge. You and Sybil are right to challenge the concept. I can't challenge it because I don't know. I mean, I simply do not know. I do accept that there is plenty of evidence to suggest that you take a medication and that nature or the virus finds its way to around it, so that it becomes useless. So therefore, mass medication under those circumstances, I agree, it seems a bit futile. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it is. This strep A virus, it really does seem to me like the beginning of COVID, and especially the beginning of the Omicron variant. The Omicron variant, it's the most, it spreads like wildfire. This could be the most dangerous variant we've ever had. And like, no one died from it. A few people died from it. It was basically a living vaccine. What it was the Omicron variant. Everyone got Omicron. Almost no one died. Almost no one died from specifically the Omicron variant, the most spreadable variant that we had.
Yeah.
So once you got COVID, you had the natural immunities. That's why people are calling it a living vaccine.
Right. Okay. Well, you've studied this much more than I have. So let's go with your assessment of it. The Sun. As Mbappe misses training, we reveal French superstar is a secret for 3 Lions fans. So the Sun is going with sports. Eat ease coming home, it says. It's trying to put on a French accent, right? It is coming home is the standard phrase amongst football fans about the World Cup, right? We won it in 1966, and now it's coming back. Mind you, we're only in the quarterfinals, so it's the first stumbling block is the French on Saturday. So what it's done is it's taken a play on the fact that we always think of the French not pronouncing our words properly. So eat ease coming home. It's all about football. Do we want to know? Not necessarily. Right. The Daily Star. Snow on the way. It's so cold. Even Amanda Holden has put a coat on. I don't know whether Amanda Holden is famous for not having a coat. I don't know.
Amanda Holden.
Well, she's a fairly well-known what's the word, celebrity, because she was a judge for the longest while on Britain's Got Talent.
Right.
And actually, of anybody on that I've seen on the screen, there are only 2 people that I really fancy who appear on television. One is Debbie, who's Paul Daniels' girlfriend, who appeared on Strictly on Dancing, and the other is Amanda Holden.
And I'm guessing the third is Dolly Parton.
No, Dolly Parton, yes, but she's in a class of her own. Yeah, I mean, Dolly Parton is nobody can say anything about Dolly Parton. Okay. Do you want to go to the park for a minute or two, just while I look up what's happening locally to see if there's anything of any interest?
Yeah, I'll do that. All right, here we go to the Grange Park. Okay, so we're back.
Right.
Have you jumped? I'll read this first. Watch your
Yes. Okay.
Stories. The page 4 from the Daily Mail says, "Who's really for race harmony?" As the king leads with example by visiting a Luton temple, Harry and Meghan fly to New York on a private jet to pick up an award.
Yes. Can you say what the award is for? Because it seems to me that very quickly scanning it is the award is because she stood up to the royals. I mean, who the hell sponsors something like that? I mean, it just shows the facile nature of Hollywood and how it tries to emulate royalty. Oh dear! Oh dear! Oh dear! Oh dear! I'll oh God, Death of a Princess. Well, while you're looking at that, Max, and finding out that Crowborough, a large sinkhole has opened up in Crowborough car park, and it's causing danger for drivers and pedestrians. So if you happen to be heading towards Crowborough, be careful. It doesn't say which car park, but there's a bit of subsidence. Sussex to feel like -7 degrees as the Met Office issues alert over the cold Arctic weather. Well, indeed, it is pretty cold out there. So let's take a look. Sussex is set for a brisk weekend as the mercury drops to -6 centigrade overnight. The Met Office has issued a level 3 cold weather alert, meaning severe weather action is being taken by the authorities. So there you are. Watch out. Get the woolies out if you haven't got them out already.
The what?
The woolies.
Oh.
What do you think I said?
I'm not saying.
The A27 and the A23 are to be closed overnight for roadworks this week. And a popular country pub was hit by fire as 5 crews called to the scene. Where was that pub? The chimney fire at the Spur pub in Swindon. From a prompt emergency response from 5 crews. Let's see if it tells us where Swindon is. The first floor starting the first floor of the building, it was a chimney fire at the Spur Swindon pub near Arundel, right? So West Sussex, and it was reported at 6 o'clock yesterday evening, with crews remaining on the scene until 9 o'clock last night. At the peak of the fire, 5 fire crews attended the scene with 5 fire engines. Wow! The crews were sent from Arundel, Bognor, Chichester, Selsey, and Worthing. There you go. Chimney fires are an important thing. I don't know that there's anything else that is.
I've got the awards thing here.
Right.
By the way.
Okay. The car crashes into the shops on the busy town centre road. I'm not sure where that.
They never really give enough information in these stories, I must say. Who are you looking at?
I'm looking at Sussex Live. Yeah, yeah. It's not the greatest. It doesn't want to tell me. Oh, here we are. Hastings into shops causing a road closure on the A21 near Hastings. So that's where that took place. And I think that's probably the long and tall of local news. There's lots of other little things, but as we say, we are local, but we're not parochial, and we don't want to get into lost cats and found dogs and my daddy can't get across the Belisha crossing or whatever. It's a bit of a nonsense, all that. Right, you are right. Now tell us about the rest of this story, then, Max.
So I'll repeat it. Who's really for race harmony? As the king leads by example with visiting a temple in Luton, Harry and Meghan fly to New York on a private jet to pick up an award.
Right.
The Sussex were receiving a Human Rights Award at the Ripple Hope Gala, where tickets sell for, now get ready for this, £847,000.
I must be seeing that.
That's more than what most people earn in their entire lives.
Yes. I mean, actually, it is. It's daft. It really is daft.
Morning, Stuart.
Oh, Stuart. I understand that has crept up behind me, and he's going to take.
Man, if you're going to be rude, the old man will creep away. You look to learn some bloody manners.
He can't do without brandy and his coffee in the morning. Right. Good. It's good to have him back, and he'll be with you in a little while. What about 9:30? Is Stuart coming on?
He's going to come on now, I think.
Oh, okay.
Stuart has a guest coming on at 10 o'clock.
Right.
Bob Davies, am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
All right. I
Excellent.
think we've had Bob Davies on before.
Yes, we have, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Nice to hear from him again.
This is one of our flagship programs. Is a conversation with Stuart Dolby. It is not an interview. It is a chat. We're giving the background as well as modern day thoughts with various people, and he's got a pretty damn good lineup of guests and has had. So that's not to be missed. So at 10 o'clock, make sure you come back and see the old man.
The thing about this, Bob, is we were both one of the first undergraduates at Sussex University.
Right.
Now, this year, what's left of it, is the 60th anniversary of the birth of the university.
Right.
So it was very good to be alive at Sussex University in the 1960s. Because it was part of, with Brighton, it was part of an epicenter of the swinging 60s.
Indeed it was.
And there was an incredible cultural revolution in terms of music, the Beatles, etc. And there's a lot of changes in social changes from the gay were out. And secondly, there were easier, it was the abolition. So it was an extraordinary decade. Young people about hearing about the 60s. And it's true.
One thing you did, you know, students, is Leslie Fielding was the vice chancellor.
Yes, I know.
And he had a university house in. And you took a racehorse and you ran it across his lawn.
That swamp was was there for Law Park judges over here.
That's right.
And one of them got done for bringing in pork, didn't they? Or bringing in red wine.
Incidentally, Stuart, I Fielding actually passed away a short while ago.
Yeah.
He's a very nice, very interesting man. I enjoyed conversations with him. Anyway, don't give it all away. Go and get your coffee, take your coat off, because all this is coming up conversation, 10 minutes or so. But the conversation
Sorry.
Oh dear, something came up.
Okay, don't worry, I've got it sorted. All right, you and Stuart will swap seats and we will play episode 3, part 1 of the bloody history of a tiny town.
Excellent.
All right.
Away we go, and that gives us time to swap. Yes. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
He sat on the bank while the river still chattered onto him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world. That was the excitement that Mole experienced in the story in the world. The river carried nothing but pleasure craft. But for a long time it was a busy, bustling port. About a mile upstream from here is the village of Hamsey. See a village today. Army of rats which disembarked from one of the visiting ships, went ashore and infected the village with bubonic plague. The Black Death. He devastated Hamsey. And while there is no historic evidence, legend has it that the residents barricaded themselves in to prevent unaffected people coming in and diseased people getting out. Eventually, they starved to death. Named after the black rats which carried the plague, the Black Death killed over half the population in Britain between 1348 and 1349. The survivors founded another village off Ham, the modern thriving village of Opham. The plague attacked Lewes several times over the following centuries, each time causing significant loss of life. So death continued to stalk Lewes, bringing tragedy to the high street in rather greater measure than other UK high streets. Hamsey gone, but Lewes as a port flourished. Ships and barges plied their trade up and down the Ouse, creating an exciting and bustling waterway. Many of these buildings, which stand on an extension of the high street in an area called Cliff, are built with old ship's timbers. Where Argos now stands was a sailor's pub called the Bear, built as a brewery in 1787, and it succumbed to the carelessness of revelry and burned down in 1918. This quiet domestic street, which runs for a short distance parallel to the Ouse, was the sailors' playground, and history relates that there were more than a dozen brothels successfully operating. Today, this street is known as Little Chelsea. Even the name makes it seem a nice place to live. The rather small abodes have found favour with many modern Louisians and are now favoured homes. And why not? They look good in a twee kind of way. And if you're not living in a former brothel, there are other historical backgrounds to raise the interest. All this talk of pubs and trading around town, it saps my energy. So I sometimes come to this little oasis. The Notts Garden in Southover Park, a lovely little hideaway. Back to the High Street, or at least its extension into the cliff area of Lewes. So I've been wandering around here because Lewes is full of antique stores and models. As I mentioned, go inside some of these shops and you'll find that they're supported by old ship's timbers. Another reminder of the days when Lewes was a port. All this talk of water has made me thirsty. I made several mentions of the time Lewes had 63 pubs. As you would expect, among the 16 that are left, there are some with strong ties to the community. Over the road from the shops, held up by ship's timbers, is the Gardener's Arms. There seems to be a tradition in Lewes, although no one admits to it, of omitting the epithet pub or tavern. This pub is called by locals simply the Gardeners. And the Gardeners it was. The origins of this pub go back to when it was an ordinary house, owned by a gardener. Often, after work, he would invite other gardeners into his front room for a drink. Eventually, it made sense to formalize the ritual, so it turned into a pub. The Gardeners is a true pub. Unusual now, it only serves pork pies and sausage rolls. Yet each year it's in the top tier of finalists for Pub of the Year. Magnificent. Back to the Street of 1,000 Brothels. Well, perhaps not 1,000, but a few anyway. There's a pub called the Snowdrop. Nice pub, they tell me. Interesting for its name and where it stands. This is the site of England's deadliest avalanche. Just after Christmas in 1836, heavy snow built up on the edge of the downs. There were 7 cottages here where the pub now stands. Despite warnings, the people living there went about their business, totally unconcerned about the snow. Then whoosh, down it came, demolishing 7 cottages and taking the lives of 8 people. Time, gentlemen, please. Not heard now, but the admonishment of past landlords that it was time to quit drinking should have been heeded by the cottagers. A disaster both for the country and the town. A brief mention of one last hostelry, the John Harvey Tavern. Named after the founder of a local brewery, the one of 16 to survive to the modern day, Harvey's has been around since at least 1790. And an important inhabitant. Along with Mole and Ratty on the banks of the River Ouse. More on that later. For the moment, back to the bar. How I wish I'd lived in Lewes when it had 63 pubs. Bliss.
Shall I get the
All right.
first?
Thanks. No.
Mm.
You're perfectly in line.
Right.
Well, welcome back to Mirador Television. I'm here with Stuart Dolby. We actually haven't done a show for quite a while now.
No.
Last week it messed up. The 2 weeks before, you were off. You were somewhere. You're in Brighton or something. So we haven't done a show together in about a month.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So this is our first show back for a while. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Yeah.
Well, we were just talking off air about a whole bunch of stuff, and you mentioned that it's going to be the coldest winter we've had in decades.
According to the National Weather Centre, that's what they said. The whole coldest winter in decades. And
I mean, it's already going to be snowing.
Well, it's the lowest temperature I've heard is 2.2. We don't get. I don't generally think we've ever got sort of 9 degrees below zero, have we? I remember I was in Germany once and it was 9% below zero, and boy, oh boy, was it cold. Yeah.
I'm going to have a look. Well, on Friday it's going to be -4.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah.
really? Well, that surprised me.
And on Saturday we got snow.
Yeah. Well, on the Downs. It will be
yeah,
on the Downs. It will be on the
probably.
Downs. Yeah.
But I'm excited for it. I love the snow. It's my favourite time of year.
Well, you like snow?
I love snow.
I like snow for about half an hour until it turns into ice, and I don't like it at all.
Oh yeah, but your street is quite steep at the end of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's...
No, once it goes into ice and black ice and all that kind of thing, it's awful.
Yeah, we got.
I mean, I like the idea of it. I mean, I like kids playing snowballs and all that kind of thing. But I can't remember in my long life a white Christmas when it was actually white on Christmas Day. I just can't remember one. People say they have it, but
the last one where we officially had a white Christmas was in 1976, because that was the year my mum was born, and that was the last time we had a white Christmas.
when was that?
1976.
Really? Yeah.
That was the last time.
First time I've ever worked White Christmas is when Bing Crosby sang the song. Nice bass voice.
Oh god! One of the things I don't quite understand is they can't predict the weather in a week's time, but they've been saying for a month now, this is going to be a terrible winter. This is going to be so cold. They can't predict the weather in a week. How do they know that it's going to be freezing cold winter?
I think it's probably guesstimates, isn't it? Thanks, sir.
Guesstimates. That's very scientific.
It's like energy prices, based on last year's estimates. If the energy company says, well, they did actually spend this much energy in January, so they'll probably do it again. But I say, well, what if I'm going off to Bermuda for January? And that's how they work, seriously. British Gas, they set the tariff on the year before. So it's just an estimate.
Really?
Yeah. They're just estimates. They don't know how much energy you've used. They just because they don't know, because the smart meters really don't tell lies. It now emerges. Well, they don't tell you all the information they should do. Basically, that's it.
They don't tell you all the information. Yeah, no, I know that.
Yeah.
We've got a smart meter on our house because it's getting forced at this point. I know very few people who don't have a smart meter.
Well, lots of people are switching from smart meters now to pay as you go.
Yeah.
Because that's much cheaper. It's much more cheaper. It's like the phone calls, isn't it? The poorer people are not going on direct debits because they can't afford it. It's much more expensive to have the direct debit because of the reasons I just told you. So they go on to smart meters to pay as you go. So when they got a few coins, they got some heat, but when they haven't, they can't be sure of it. About 7 million people have switched to pay as you go.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. I didn't know that.
All the poor people.
Okay.
Seriously. I mean,
we were on a key meter where you would go to the shop. Can I have £20 on the other?
That's it.
That's what we were on, and it does. Yeah, I mean, it did.
It's pay as you go, isn't it?
Yeah, that is pay as you go.
When you think about, so what they do really is they set the tariff on.
Well, we got a
estimates.
smart meter because we were told at the time it was going to be cheaper.
Yeah, well, they're lying.
The energy companies were lying to us.
Well, they lie through their bloody
What?
teeth. You know that. I've told you.
I didn't know the energy companies lied.
Really?
I'm being sarcastic, Stuart.
They're the biggest profiteers in the country now.
I know, I was being
I mean,
sarcastic.
I told you about this, didn't I? You know,
Yes, you
the
have.
money.
I've been listening, yeah.
the money that they get. For example, if you look at it, the six big cartel. They're a cartel. They're like the banks. They have a follow my leader policy, right?
Mm.
So if Lloyd's puts money out by what percent, then so does Barclays, and then so does NatWest, and so on and so forth. Now, this is cartel, which is British Gas, EDF French, E.ON German, Npower German, Scottish Power, which is run by the Spaniards, and it was SSE, but now it might be OVO or it might be Octopus, depending on who you ask, because they will tell you they've got different numbers of customers. And Octopus, I'm not sure about because of their Robin Hood venture up in Nottingham, which was an absolute disaster. But not many people know that, as Michael Caine would say. But I mean, the energy crisis is really, really getting very serious now.
Yeah.
I mean, look, when Mrs. Truss, whatever her name,
Yeah.
she decided that she was going to curry favour by getting it down to 2,500, which is a figure she thought people could tolerate. Well, it was a lot more than what it was going to be under. The energy cap was set twice a year, October the 1st and April the 1st. But without telling anybody, the regulator turned it into 4 times a year, every 3 months. So when Mrs. Truss was actually going to reduce it, it would have been on the 1st of October, it would have been 3,500. Okay.
Do you want to just go into energy matters properly?
What do you mean properly?
We do a specific energy matters section.
Yeah.
Because we're just going on about energy constantly.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's the idea, yeah. It's up to you.
Well, I don't know if you have all your notes written down ready for it. So if you don't, then that's fine. We'll just go.
Well,
on
he doesn't
we are.
like me. He doesn't like me reading off notes. So,
No. Well, no. He doesn't like you reading off a script.
Yeah.
But sorry, carry on then.
No. I was just rambling on about it. The thing about it. Well, if we're talking about energy hubs now, let's talk about the protest down yesterday down the bottom of town about.
Oh yeah, saw him.
Be actually protesting against investment in fossil fuels by the county council. They have invested in BP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if you know this, but BP actually goes a lot of its dividends into pension funds, or so it claims. Okay? Right. Now, I've done a lot of research about this, and I know a great deal about pensions, and in fact, it's designated pension schemes. That means a fixed sum of the lifetime of the employee, right? I've got final salary, which is a very different thing. So they invest in these designated pension funds. Do you know how much they invest?
How much?
1.6%. 1.6% of the actual pension fund comes from BP's investment. Right. Now, the shares.
What is their justification for it? Because I understand the percentage and investment. Why are they? What is the justification? Why? What's their response to this?
Who?
The council, when they're asked, why are you investing in?
Oh, well, that's easy because there's a very good dividend.
What does that mean?
Well, it means they get some money. I mean, you get money from.
And remind me, who are in charge in the council? It's the Green Party, isn't it?
I'm not sure. I've got a feeling it's still the Conservatives, isn't it? I wouldn't be sure. I think it is the Conservatives in the county council.
So,
Yes, I'm sure it is. Well, I'm really very cross with the county council at the moment because my wife had this fall.
oh
Right?
yes, I remember saying.
And research showed that it's the county council's responsibility. She came out of this is a digression of moment. It came out of Waitrose, turned left. There's a little road there, and one of the flagstones has come up like that. And she tripped over it. And I asked my friends at Liberal Democrats what to do, and I said, who's accountable for it? Is it the town council, or is it the county council, district council, or the county council? And it turned out to be the county council. They're in charge of roads and so forth, and therefore they're accountable, and therefore I could sue them. But it turns out a bit more complicated than that, because it might be that it's common land, but now my friends at Liberal Democrats say no, it's definitely their responsibility. So my wife said, look, don't sue them. I just want them to mend these pavements. I want to guarantee that they'll actually do this, because what about people coming along with a pram? We're old people, okay? But, you know, other people are going to do this, and it's their responsibility.
I mean, I've tripped over on one of the slabs going up to Landport,
Yeah.
and I even did it here on the high street, just by the traffic lights. I fell over and hit. Luckily, I had my headphones on, because I broke my headphones when I hit the floor. And lucky I had them on, otherwise I would have hit my head on the concrete. But I just got back up and was like, ouch, that hurt. Oh well, anyway. And I just went about my day like nothing had happened, because I'm young and I can just do that. You know, if you had fallen, that would have been...
Well, my wife was still getting
Or
that's what she hurt, and she's still getting the reverberations from it now. It's quite, I mean, it's just all these councils, like the district council, is unbelievably incompetent. I mean, look, I went to this district council. I told you this. I don't know if we've told this story before. In 2019, and they said we're going to have meet the carbon zero emissions by 2030. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? They said, oh, we're going to have electric charging points and trees. 6 months ago, they did an update, and I said, how many electric charging points have you got in the town? They said, I don't know. I said, well, I'll tell you, you've got 8. So that's a very, very good achievement, isn't it? You know.
Well, I've got to be careful how I say this. I know someone who went to a sustainability meeting in where I live.
Yeah.
And it was, how can we make the village more eco-friendly? And it was charging points for electric cars. People should just be buying electric cars. Like, come on, seriously.
They're all expensive.
They were really, you know, the person I know who was at this meeting was getting really cross, because she was like, I can't afford an electric car. I would love an electric car, but I can't afford one.
Yeah.
And their idea was just buy an electric car. And it was a sustainability meeting about my village. And they just wouldn't shut up, and they kept talking about the Amazon rainforest and how it's dying. It's like, no, we're trying to. I mean, sure, that's a bad thing, whatever. But like, we're trying to talk about making our community sustainable. Why are we talking about the Amazon rainforest?
I've been
12,000 miles away, or whatever.
I've been in the Amazon rainforest.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What was that like?
Oh, lots of trees. No, lots of very green spaces, because all the loggers had actually chopped them down.
Lots of trees.
Well, there were lots of trees.
I can imagine there were.
But not so many now, because of the people who chopped them down to graze cattle and that kind of thing. Absolute bloody scandal, really. It's awful. It's terrible.
But yeah, it was a sustainability meeting about the local village, and they wouldn't shut up about the Amazon rainforest. For whatever reason. Obviously, it's an important issue, but not for our community. The
point is that people pay an awful lot of lip service to the words climate change. They actually say, like, Extinction Rebellion, for example, they make their point that this is very, very much a crisis. They do that very, very well. But when it comes to it, you ask them what we should do about it, they haven't got a bloody well clue. And I said, well, shouldn't we or shouldn't we do something like bring about wind power, or do something about solar power and all that kind of thing, and so forth and so on? They said, oh no, that's for the government to decide. I said, well, they can't decide anything, this government. They can't even decide who the bloody leader is, apart from anything else.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go to a quick clip, because I'm having some issues here with technical issues. So we're going to go to a clip, and then we'll be back in 2 minutes. We're just playing scenes in Sussex. Okay, so we're back. We just need to send off an email, but we're struggling to find the correct one. So we're just going to quickly go to a longer clip, and it should be all right. So we're going to this clip here, 5 minutes long. Okay, and we're back. So we are just waiting for our guest, Bob Davis. We just sent him an email, and he should be joining us soon. So how long have you known him for?
Well, we both, we're getting on for a long time, 60 years. We're both one of the first undergraduates at Sussex University. It was started out in 1961, and we were there, I think, first to 64. And we've kept in touch over the years. And the reason I've asked him along today is to actually, this year is the 60th anniversary of its opening. And we were both really quite involved in the university and very devoted to it. So I thought we might just have a chat about, both our backgrounds and what we got there. It was a very special time, and the university was very special. It was part of what's known as the famous Seven. The government had decided to have 7 new universities. And there hadn't been a new university in years, apart from the one in Keble, I think it was called, near Stoke. But there were traditional university, Oxbridge, and then there were the red brick ones, and now they had these ones which were known as the plate glass universities. And it was Sussex, Kent, I think, Norwich, East Anglia, Essex, how many is that? That's 4. Lancaster, 5, York, 6, and there's one more which escapes me. Let's think. Anyway, they were 6, and they were very special because they were new. And also, Sussex case, there was a different approach to learning. But I'll talk to us when Bob arrives. If he arrives.
Well, we'll go into the next story. Sure. Hang
on a sec. This is ridiculous, isn't it?
What?
You might find out what's going on.
No, show it. Give that a minute. All right.
I'm giving him a minute.
We're gonna go to Grange Park for a minute. Okay, so we're back. We were talking earlier about strep A.
Yeah.
You said you'd had strep A as a kid.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because it's going around again.
Well, I can't remember. I was with so many things I can't distinguish between them. They're all pretty painful. Yeah, it was. I don't know. The one that really got to me was mumps. I can't remember why. Yeah. But then I had measles, German measles, which is rubella, isn't it? Then I had scarlet fever, I think, and then diphtheria was frightened. I think I didn't have it, but we had to stop going to swimming pools apparently.
Yeah, it was spread through swimming pools or something, which sounds ridiculous in my opinion. But whatever, I'm not a scientist. That have you heard all this new stuff about Strep A going
Yeah,
around?
yeah.
To me, it sounds like the beginning of COVID. Oh, there's this new virus out. It's gonna kill. It's gonna kill your kids. Oh, it's gonna kill everyone. It's gonna kill grandma. I don't know if this is anything. I think the media are just hyping it up because it gets clicks, because it's fear mongering. That's what I think. Do you think there's any validity to that?
Well, I don't really know. I mean, I tend to believe what the medics say, but you don't know with these pandemics or these epidemics. You can't call it a pandemic yet, can
No.
you? Maybe it's localized. You don't know how infectious it is and so on. I mean, you've got to admit that there have been tremendous advances in medical technologies, if you like to call it.
Well, I don't think anyone in the world is denying that.
Yeah. But occasionally, I mean, when you get the Chinese people involved, it gets a bit more serious, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
do you think COVID was, just an accident? Do you think it was a natural thing?
My wife believes it was an absolute. It was actually figured out, and they wanted to do it.
So
you probably feel like that because you're on the same wavelength as she is. I know.
What do you think? Do you think it's?
I don't.
An accident?
I don't. I think it could be an accident. I don't know. I wouldn't trust the Chinese on anything. I mean, they're right old fixers. I certainly wouldn't play a game of cards with them. That's for sure.
No, I wouldn't.
I mean, when I lived in Hong Kong, of course, you couldn't. There was no such thing as gambling, so you had to go over to Macau, and you should have seen them in Macau. They were got over the place, absolutely mad. Yeah, so, yeah.
No, I know what you're talking about. I can imagine, but that sounds hilarious to actually see it in person.
How they were fiddling the books, and how they were actually changing the whole thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, we got Bob Davies here, so we'll introduce him in a minute.
Okay.
So what we're going to quickly do is arrange the computer properly. We're going to just pop over to Grange Park for a minute whilst we swap monitors. So you stay there for a minute, Stuart, and then we'll introduce Bob Davies. Here we go.
Good morning. My guest this morning is Bob Davies. He's a friend of mine of very long standing, 60 years in fact. We were both two of the first undergraduates at the University of Sussex. It was started in 1961, and we were there in our first year, I think, in 1964. And this year is the 60th anniversary of the university. So I thought it was very nice to actually have a conversation with Bob about how we got there and what we thought. And I know that both you and I were very involved in the university, and we were lucky to be there in the 60s. Bob, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you came to choose or came to go to Sussex as opposed to any other universities at the time?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in southeast London in Woolwich, and I went to the local grammar school, which was called Shooters Hill, and I did my levels in geography, economics, etc. And then I hadn't dreamt of going to university, but we had a new intake of teachers a couple of years before in economics and things, and they were sort of quite dynamic, and it was a sleepy old school before that. And they sort of suggested to a number of us that we ought to think about going to university because we weren't stupid. And so we did. And so when it came time to apply, I was looking around, and there was the Leicesters and the Birminghams and stuff, and then there was this
the red bricks, yeah, the red brick ones.
And then there was this thing on the south coast, and it's true, it's famous now. There was an evening. My dad used to come in with the evening news, and there was an evening news article in it. I must have been in sort of spring 1964 when we were sort of thinking of making applications, focusing on this university, a trendy university, and there were photos of the famous J twins and stuff in their Mary Quant outfits and stuff like that, and stories about people living in guest houses and sitting on the beach and stuff like that, and it all sounded quite good, really. So I did apply, and I had an interview. I remember coming down for it and getting the old what were they, the Southdown buses out to the university, and anyway, I was offered a place, and I got sufficiently good A levels to take it up. So it was actually at the end of September. So I think there was a freshers week that started just before October '64. We arrived, all this great band of. I think we weren't the first students. That they were 61, but I think we were the first fairly large intake.
We were the first full year. Yes, we were the first full year.
Yeah. So I think the number of students sort of quadrupled or something, because there'd been handfuls before, and then suddenly I think 500 or 700 new students.
Yeah, it was. I think it was about 5,500. Well, that was the first full year, as it were.
Yeah.
But there was. Yeah, my story is slightly different. I was a working class person, and I didn't get very good A levels as it happened. But I didn't know then, but I got ADHD, and I managed to talk my way in, because apparently Brighton or New Sussex was one of the famous 7. There were 7 new ones, weren't there?
Yeah.
There was Sussex, Kent, Lancaster, Essex, and so on and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
But going to university in Essex wasn't quite as alluring as going to one in Brighton.
Oh.
So anyway, my headmaster wrote to them and said that Stuart, I was only got 1 year to do his A levels, because his father was working class and insisted he left school and get a job and help the family out. So anyway, that went on, and I got an interview and talked my way into it. And the thing was, the government had told that these new university must take in working class people or poor people, and I qualified on that front. And when I got there, when I first went there and I got there, there was all these middle class people chatting to one another, arranging parties. And I felt like little Annie at the Orphan Annie, with my nose up against the windpan. Why can't I do this? Why can't I be in all of this? And I had that sort of lack of self-confidence going. But anyway,
I think that was quite wide. I think that was quite typical, actually. I think, there was a massive. I mean, there were super confident people flashing around, kind of thing, who ran the Students' Union, and there was like great mass of unwashed people to whom this was a bit of a culture shock, to be honest, wasn't it? I mean, it was like, what's going on here? And but I mean, I think I grew into it. It was slow, but it was, the first year was a bit strange. We were sort of stuck in these guest houses, single-sex guest houses and stuff. And
Graham Greene once called actually flea pits, didn't he?
Yeah, well, they weren't. We're looking back on it; they weren't particularly good. And I got decent A levels, but I mean, I can't say I was really kind of that well educated or anything. I mean, when we started off, I mean, you'd be the same for you. we had books to read in the summer vacation before we went there, because we had a choice of doing Religion and the Rise of Capitalism, a course, history
That's right.
course, based on
I remember that.
Tawney's book, and another one which was called The Civilization of the Renaissance by Jacob Burckhardt. And I thought we were supposed to read both of them. Well, I mean, I sat for hours reading these things with kind of dictionaries by my side, because there were words of like 5 syllables kind of ending in opology, you know. And I mean, I don't think I understood a word of the Burckhardt one.
Well, actually, Bob, sorry to interrupt, but wasn't it all part of the whole one of the claims of the thing? Was it was a new approach to learning. Asa Briggs said that, you know, he brought this down from Oxford, that there was a new approach that we would to learning, that there would be I think it was 7 papers you had to take. Now, I did economics, so 4 of my papers were in economics, and the other 3 was, as you say, history of art, psychology, and sociology. So you had a different one there. And also they introduced the tutorial system rather than the lecture system, didn't they? And that was, you know, it wasn't like Oxford. We weren't given a glass of sherry in the tutors.
No. Having said that, I was referring to the first 2 terms, because it was a foundation course. And I did 2 terms of economics, I think, and this history course about religion and the rise of capitalism, and I think there was a philosophy one as well. So those you did that until the Easter of the following 1965, basically, and that was, I mean, I had to get my head around that, because, as I said, I couldn't understand half the language that was being used in one of the books and stuff like that. So it was quite tough, really. And yes, we went to tutorials every week for each subject, didn't we? And we had to write an essay every week based on a reading list. They actually had to, you know, work quite hard. And because it was a tutorial with a few students and a tutor, you couldn't really busk it, because you were going to be found out, weren't you? If you turned up not having read anything, you were on the spot, really, weren't you? So you had to do a certain amount of work. But you mentioned Asa Briggs, and I do remember, I mean, he wasn't Vice Chancellor at the time. What was he? Dean of the Faculty of something?
No, it's John Fulton. John Fulton was he?
Fulton, wasn't it? Yeah, but he was.
John Fulton.
Briggs was Dean of something, wasn't he? And I mean, he was one of the founding fathers, obviously, but I can distinctly remember, and it was in my first year, perhaps in the first 2 terms, you were called to meet him personally in his study, and he'd sort of say, "Hello, how you getting on? All right, oh good, goodbye," kind of thing. And I mean, that just wouldn't happen these days, would it? You wouldn't even know what your dean looked like, probably, let alone your Vice Chancellor. I mean, so that was quite incredible. And when you think about the tuition we had with a tutor, almost 1 to 2 or 1 to 3. I mean, that was Where would you get that today? You just
It was very good. It was wonderful. Also, I didn't know this, but apparently, it had 53% women, which is unheard of in those days for a university, and that's because people like the J twins, which were the daughter of a very beautiful twins, and they were daughter of a Labour politician. Well, you know, and they weren't quite bright enough to go to Oxford, so they came down to Sussex, and a lot of other people did. A lot of the grammar people did, and that really.
Do you think they opted? Do you not think they chose it over Oxford? No,
I don't think they did. I wouldn't be totally sure.
Do you know what I found out in recent years? That Douglas J, their father, was a Woolwich. Well, I mean, he was a very middle class person who went to private prep schools and stuff, but he was born in Woolwich as well, where I came from.
Yeah. But I mean, the other thing, which was interesting about this, because there's when John Fulton, who was a bit of a fixer, he said he wanted money for a chemistry but instead he built a residence hall, And when it became known that he spent that money in a residence hall, they said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "Because I believe in social levelling," which was a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
And that meant that on the campus there was a mixing of the sexes and so on, and the classes, and with all women. Sussex was actually a social life as well, wasn't it? It wasn't just a place where we learned things. It became a social life, don't you think?
I think it did. I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was a slow process. I mean, I say we arrived straight. You know, a lot of us arrived straight from school. There were loads of blokes, and I mean, although you say it was 53% women, the majority of women were in the arts and humanities and social sciences.
Yeah.
There were loads of blokes. And hardly any women in the sciences, and the blokes. A lot of, I mean, remembering from the guest house I lived in the first year, a lot of the blokes, they came in the week, and they spent all day in lectures from 9 till 5 or whatever it is, one after the other, and there wasn't much time for anything else. And then they buggered off home to the home counties at weekend. I mean, I'm probably exaggerating, but I mean there was that sort of tendency. So, yeah, I mean, I played football and stuff like that. I got to know people like that, but I mean, I think it sort of developed over the 60s. I mean, I graduated in 67 and came back for a year in 68 to 69. And it was obviously a much bigger place and a much sort of, I mean, it was fairly buzzing, really. And I mean, there was some great music. There was some great music to be heard and stuff like that, wasn't there? I mean,
well, I was going to come to that. The fact is that it was university was with Brighton an epicenter of the swinging 60s, where the swinging 60s meant everything changed. All of a sudden, we had the music changing, like the Beatles, and all these, and some of these bands came and played. I don't think the Beatles ever played there. Sure, it was Pink Floyd, wasn't it? And Chuck Berry, and you know more about that than I do. Yeah. But also, there was all kinds of social changes, wasn't there?
Yeah.
There was the abolition in the 60s. The 60s were an extraordinary decade. I know young people get very, very fed up with us talking about us old codgers talking about it.
Yeah.
And I think that it was there was abolition of hanging. There was that gay people could come out then, and it was easy divorces, and all kinds of things went on.
Yeah.
And it seemed that everything was possible. You could just do anything you wanted to do, but you couldn't, of course. But it seemed like that was the way, and it was very good to be there, wasn't it?
Yeah. I don't regret going there at all. I mean, I still feel quite attached to it, really, and as you know, I've been to 1 or 2 reunions and stuff like that. I always find it interesting what's going on there, and I'm always, and of course I live in Brighton now again, and I'm always bumping into people who have been to the university, not necessarily at the same time as me, but a bit later, kind of thing. And it was a good experience. And of course, you're right. There were lots of social changes. I mean, we were the boom. I suppose we were the first baby boomers born at the end of the war, when our dads came home from service and stuff like that. And we were, I think, we were the children of the welfare state to a large extent. And of course, in 64, when we were, one of my first experiences at Sussex was political, because I wasn't particularly political as a schoolboy or anything like that. But when I got to Sussex, in my guest house, there were some left-wing students of our age, who were already been engaged in politics. And of course, it was the 1964 general election. Within 2 weeks of us arriving there, more or less, and they said, come out and canvass on the Molescombe estates with us. We've got to get this Tory government out and stuff like that.
Yeah, but the Labour Party won the seat in Kemp Town, didn't it? With Dennis Corbyn, you remember?
Well, this is it. So I went out canvassing on the Molescombe estates, and then on the day of the election, on the day of the voting, of course we couldn't vote then. We didn't have the vote at 18. It was going to be 21. We were, non-voters. But we went to the Dome in the evening, and for the count, and it was absolutely fantastic. And it was packed. There were loads of students there. Some of them quite right wing actually as well. And it was quite dramatic because they had the televisions on as well. So you got the results from elsewhere, and they kept doing this count, and it went on and on and on and on. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, they said, our counters are exhausted. We're stopping the count. We're resuming again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So the thing was on a knife edge, you knew. And I went back at 10 o'clock in the morning. There weren't that many people back there, but they recounted. And this guy called Dennis Hobden, who was a post office worker, won Kemp Town for Labour by 7 votes. Seven votes after 7 recounts or something like that. And I was walking through Pavilion Gardens afterwards by myself. And there's this middle-aged elderly couple walking towards me. And I passed them and I looked at the guy and he looked absolutely crestfallen. And it was the defeated Tory candidate who obviously didn't know what had hit him, because at that point there had never been a Labour seat in the whole of Sussex.
Yeah.
And
you're right, yeah.
That was a very interesting experience within the first month of my life as a student, really. And I don't know what the inhabitants of Molescombe made of us, but with our lengthening hair that we'd started to let grow when we saw that was legitimate.
Yeah, those hairy students. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and also, I mean, I can remember, like you. Finally, I live in Lewes. It's quite strange that we both live near to the university. And I still go there, actually. I've still been involved in mentoring there, as you know, and that kind of things. And it did change my life. Obviously, I'd always had this feeling that, the class system is one of the worst sort of the things about this time that should be sorted out. I think there's a real problem for this country. The class thing, and there was a certain class leveling somehow by being there. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
What do you think? What did it do in terms of your career after leaving? Because you got an MA somewhere, didn't you?
Well, it's very difficult to say that. I mean, obviously, it did open up certain things. I did an MA and I stuck with sociology, actually. And then I was at a research institute in Leicester for a couple of years, registered for a PhD, which I didn't actually write up, which I have had cause to regret, actually. I think I'm stupid not to have done. And then I stayed, I went to Durham. I first went to Durham. I got a research fellowship in the sociology department at Durham University. And I was there for a couple of years, and then I went to Newcastle Poly, as it was then, the precursor of Northumbria University, and I worked there for about 5 years. I was a research fellow again in the sort of sociology department, or whatever it was called then, and I was attached to a Home Office funded community development program, CDP. It was the one and only anti-poverty program in the UK, which was launched by Canavan in 1969, sort of following the LBJ kind of poverty programs in the States, basically. And we worked alongside a team of community workers in a very, very deprived part of North Shields, and produced reports and stuff like this, and so I was a kind of practicing social scientist, and I suppose I probably could have and maybe should have continued in that, but I kind of I veered off and eventually got into filmmaking, film and television making. With as Channel 4 came on here, there was some money around to help establish regional film sort of independent film units, and somebody I knew was already involved in all that and got some money and we were able to put together a company. And so for the next 23 or so years, I was researching and producing audio-visual television programs, the odd film, and that's what I did for the rest of my working life until that finished. And I went off to live in France for 11 years, and then I came back to Brighton.
And here you are.
And here I am.
My strategy was rather different. I didn't get a very good degree because I'd lived the life. I mean, just to digress for a second, you were very involved in the music at Sussex, weren't you? Your friend Mo Foster and all that.
Oh yeah, well, yes and no. I didn't really know Mo until just after graduation, because a friend of mine then got a flat with him for a bit. Yeah. And then I got to know Mo, and that he was on the verge with Linton Naif and others, a jazz pianist, forming a kind of a group called Affinity, and this became quite well known, Linda Hoyle and Affinity, and it was Mo Foster plus various other people who had been in the university groups or in the jazz trio like Linton Naif, and but I hadn't really been involved in the music scene as an undergraduate. I mean, only to the extent of going to gigs and stuff like that and seeing all these wonderful people like who.
Well, it was Pink Floyd. It was Pink Floyd, the Cream. Right?
So Cream twice in '66 and '67.
But before, universities used to have folk singers. They didn't have anything like that. But
they did.
And then suddenly we got these bands coming on, didn't we?
Yeah, I can't remember who was the. I do remember I think at some point there was a guy in the year below us called Tony Shorrocks, who became the social secretary or whatever, and got all these, got a load of these groups along. I can't remember that much in the first year, except I did see Sonny Boy Williamson, or one of the Sonny Boy Williamson, backed by Gary Farr and the T-Bones. And I did see Champion Jack Dupree. So these were kind of blues people. And I did go to the folk group a bit. Unfortunately, I've got the impression, I may be wrong here, but no, I'm fairly sure that the year before we arrived, they'd had Bob Dylan at the folk club, who, as an unknown, on his first.
Yeah, and also they had Paul Simon. Nobody knew him.
Paul Simon as well. Yeah, incredible. So, I mean, there was some very good music. And there was
Pink Floyd and Cream. But one thing was missing out. Charlie Watts lived in Lewes, but the Rolling Stones never played at Sussex.
No, they didn't. You're right. Pink Floyd. I can't remember. Oh, I saw the Nice, Keith Emerson. Nice, fantastic stuff. I also got. I mean, one of the. I also got to like jazz too, a certain sort of jazz, anyway, because unlike the scientists who were herded into these lecture halls kind of for hours at a time, I mean, we were fairly freer in handling our own time, and we had to do it fairly sensibly. But I mean, we had a couple of tutorials a week, didn't we? We didn't have loads of lectures.
No.
Didn't have many seminars either, so it was like tutorial based. So you were in the library, and then you take a break and go and sit in the JCR, the Junior Common Room, and there'd be these guys playing, rehearsing modern jazz stuff like Linton Naif and Grant Serple and I can't remember the name of Nick, the bassist. and they'd be rehearsing all the time. So I imbibed without knowing what it was they were playing. I mean, I think it was mostly modern jazz quartet, Oscar Peterson, all that sort of stuff. And some of that stuff is recorded because Mo Foster had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and he used to record stuff. And I have albums with some of that stuff from Sussex University on it, especially when they played at the New University's Jazz Festival, and it's very good.
Yeah. Well, I lead the life as well. I went to all these gigs, and I got involved in a paper called Sussex Outlook. There was Wine Press and Sussex Outlook, so that was my first involvement with the newspaper. And then the thing is that I didn't work hard enough, and I got a 2-2. Desmond, as they know, a 2-2. After Desmond Tutu, you got a 2-2. Okay. And anyway, I went to London, and I didn't have a job, and I didn't know what to do. And I was labouring and on a building site, and there was a copy of the Daily Telegraph lying about.
Yeah.
And I never read the Daily Telegraph, and I opened it, and there was an advertisement saying, "Researcher wanted for Financial Times library. Must be a graduate editorial prospects." And although I didn't know it the day, my IDHD came into open up. I went for an interview, and I got the job. Now this was extraordinary because the Financial Times then was incredibly elitist.
Yeah.
The editor used to put ads in the Telegraph saying, "If you've got an Oxbridge first, there's a job here for you in the Financial Times." So they would only take on bloody Oxford graduates, and they had this real working class boy working in the bloody library. And so I'm very numerate. I'm not saying I'm clever, I'm very numerate. So I used to put when library didn't mean books, it just meant taking all the files around to various people. And the premier sort of company column is called Lex column. They write about companies, and I used to go and look over their shoulder, and I used to say, "Are you quite sure we got that right?" And they were gasp when they look at me. These guys were very, very posh people and very bright and so on. And I said, "I don't think that's quite right." And the next thing you know, they came out to the library and he said, "Would you like a job in company comments?" So I was writing about company comments and so forth and so forth. And finally, I got quite good at it, and I was sent out to Hong Kong. The editor then was a German guy called Freddie Fisher, and he said, "I want you to go to Hong Kong and write about the stock exchange the other day. You write about London." And I said, "Oh, that sounds rather good." And after a year, my life of flukes, I got there just when the Hong Kong Stock Exchange was going through the roof. I was sending all this stuff back to the FT, and it was on the front page every day. And I finally got a phone call from Freddie saying, "Stuart, you're doing very well there. I think I ought to find you posting." I said, "Well, actually, Freddie, I was thinking about going off to Vietnam to be a war correspondent." And he said, "No, we do not want a war correspondent. We are not interested in small wars. You can't go to Hong Kong." Anyway, Mark Franklin, who was the Observer's correspondent, he decided he had enough. So he said, "Look, why don't you write for us?" So I started writing for the Observer, and they Financial Times saw my the byline on the Observer, and they said, "Will you write for us as well?" So I'd actually created the first and so far only full-time war correspondent has ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I did another sort of 10 wars after that, and now I'm still standing, as you see.
Yeah.
Well, it was a life of flukes.
I did actually see one or two of your war reports from in the FT, especially one. I think it was the fall of Saigon or something like that.
Yeah.
About then, which would have been what 75 or something like that. Yeah. Which was very impressive, really. Yeah.
But the point is, you see, I'd never written for a newspaper until I got this job, and
how did you hone your journalism skills then?
That is a very good question. And Leslie was asking me about it. I never went. You couldn't go to journalism school in those days. It wasn't a possibility. I don't know. I do know that there are certain things you must do. You've got to be very, very interested in everything. You really got to in everything, and also you learn certain tricks. You learn that my journalistic skills. You learn that. One of the first things I learned is that nobody can keep a secret. Nobody can take information just to the volleyball. So you've got to learn a way of actually getting the information out of people. And the way to do this is not to go from A to B saying, what do you think about this? You go from A, B, C, D, and E. So you get 5 versions. And you go around from right and left. So what do you think? Like, let's say somebody like a husband has abandoned a wife with 5 children, and you ask each of 5 children what they think about the husband. They'll all give you a southern version. And so you hone it down, and then you finally get the right story. But I suppose you just generally just grow. When people say to you, why did you become a journalist? I said, I couldn't actually tell you. I've got no idea.
Right.
And then it just sort of happened, if you know what I mean. And then
it was it was a remarkable break. Obviously, it was an incredible break to just spot that advert and to follow it up, really, to get into the FT. I mean, that's a coup, really, isn't it? I mean, that's like, But I mean, it's I have journalistic friends who I don't think went to journalism. Well, I know one of them went to journalism school actually, but it's a different. I mean, obviously, writing an article, distilling stories, writing an article is rather different from writing an essay, university essay, which is probably distinguished by long sentences with lots of subclauses and commas and
The thing about it is,
you've got to write short, punchy sentences with full stops and kind of, haven't you?
No, but also the difference is I do mentoring on this. I write articles rather than bulletins, which is what an essay is basically. And the thing is, you have to write a story, okay? That starts somewhere, has a middle and has an end when you're writing about something that's happened.
Yeah.
And I just learned how to do it. And people said, why did you become a war correspondent? And I first said, well, the reason, John Swain, my famous, good famous war correspondent, he said, well, Stuart, it's better than catching the 10 to Croydon, 10 to 8 going Croydon every day. Don McCullin, the famous photographer, he said, well, it's the adrenaline kick.
Yeah.
And I found it was something else. Vietnam was the first war situation, right? Vietnam was the first television war. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So when the invasion, when the Viet Cong had this incredible invasion of 81 villages and so to try in other direction. This appeared on American televisions every night. And the great American people said, right, what the hell is this? We're told we're winning this war and they're in our embassy. And that brought about the end of the war because Johnson became unelectable and you had Nixon. And so I feel, in a small way, I played a part in bringing about the end of the war. And I say, that's why I became a war correspondent.
Yeah.
I still feel that.
Yeah. And in many respects, it was the first televised war, and to some extent the last one, because they learnt their lesson after that, didn't they?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
There weren't journalists roaming everywhere like in Iraq or whatever.
Yeah, quite.
I mean, obviously there is some footage now. There was a very good 5-part series about it on the television about 2 years ago, with some remarkable footage. But no, I mean the door shut on that, didn't it? I mean, no, it's what were the other ones? You were in Africa at some point.
I was in Africa, yeah. Beirut.
Beirut.
Yeah, Beirut, and then a Lebanon invasion of Israeli invasion of Lebanon.
Right.
I also did one in Oman, which nobody ever heard of, but that was very interesting because the sheikh there had got a lot of British mercenaries to go and do his fighting for him.
Right.
And that was really quite interesting because I'll tell you one, there was there was a British pilot flying over and so forth and so on. And the Mogadishu hijacker had flown from Mogadishu and tried to land in Salalah, which was in Oman. It was the airport there. And this guy, Dan Carter, who was a posh bloody English pilot, saying, "Oh, Dorby, have a word with this man. He keeps saying, I want to land. Have a word with him, will you?" So I said, "Well, all right." I said, "Oh, hello, Mr. Mogadishu. Stuart Dorby from the Financial Times." And he finally landed. So I got out, I wrote a story for the Financial Times, and they put it right on the front page saying, "Financial Times journalist negotiates with Mogadishu hijacker." And it was the first. And the Financial Times sent me an email, cable saying, "Trust you." They didn't want to put it there, but it was on the front page.
Yeah.
It was really quite weird.
Oh.
So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm still in touch with them, and I get invited back. Yeah. It's a great paper now. Really good.
The FT.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't read it actually, but.
It's terrific with the big reads, and also it's got a very good pension. I'm pleased to say.
Oh, I'm pleased to hear that. Yeah. So it really was a really good break seeing that Telegraph advert.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it was a fluke. I'm writing my memoirs now, and it's called A Life of Flukes.
You've been writing them for years.
Yeah.
When are you going to finish? You've got to draw a line under it somewhere.
Well, I've gone into novel writing and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You've got
to draw a line. You've got to finish your memoirs at some point. You can always do another. You can do another.
Well, that's I'm about 2/3 into it. Yeah. But now I'm also a broadcaster, talking to you.
You are. How many viewers have you got?
I don't know, Max. How many viewers have we got?
So Keith says about 3,000 a month.
About 3,000 a month.
Right. Okay.
Well, we're only starting up. You see, it's really new, really.
It shut down during COVID
because of COVID. It shut down, and that really put could put to it.
Okay.
So we're just trying to revive it.
Okay. Well, I hope I haven't put a dent in your viewing figures today. As everybody.
No, I'm sure we got quite a following of this particular program, haven't we, Max? Apparently, yeah. Well, I'm getting all my friends to come on.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends are war correspondents. So, they're getting.
Well, how can you follow the content, or can't you? How can you know what's coming up?
What's coming up
on your program?
I don't. I mean, the point of this program, it's a conversation. It's like me and you having a chat in the pub.
Yeah, but
it's not.
How do you give warning to your viewers in advance what's on this particular day, or doesn't it work like that? Can they just access it? They can access Anytime.
They must assume that I try and do it every Wednesday, you see.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got to find somebody for next Wednesday. And I hope it's going to be Emma Acher, who is the editor of the Financial Times.
All
And
right.
she comes from Lewis, can you believe?
Oh, right.
So that might be very good, but I've got to get hold of her yet first.
Okay. But is it accessible online anyway at other times, or is it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Like a podcast thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can have a look at it. You just want you go into Mirador and YouTube, don't you?
Okay.
You can do YouTube Mirador Television. You can go to the Mirador Television website. You can go to the Facebook page, LinkedIn page, Twitter page, and blogger page, Instagram as well, but we're not very active on there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And there's an awful lot of sharing, Bob, as well. You know,
Okay.
people who get it on Twitter, they share it with other people.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
really.
But we're only just sort of in our infancy in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
The other program I want to do is Energy Matters, which I annoy everybody by.
yeah. Very topical.
Yeah, very topical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a go at the cartels, the big six cartels, who are they're supposed to actually invest people's money, but they pay themselves £1 million every year.
Well, it seems to be universal. I've just read an article in the Sunday Times financial bit this morning about nursery schools. The same's happened to them. They've been bought up by, I don't know, people like institutions, hedge funds, etc. And they're now a lot of them are facing a large amount of debt because the way that the things work and the profits that are extracted. Nursery schools all along the south coast, just unbelievable.
Right. Okay, Bob. Well, it's fantastic to come and talk to you and see you. I'm going to Brighton quite a lot recently. I'll have to get in touch with you next time.
Yeah, do. All right. No problem.
Except I'm a bit worried about the crackheads having a go at me.
Oh yeah, I know.
My great colleague here, Max, said he was in Brighton recently, and outside of Boots there were two guys with needles in their arm. Is that right, Max?
Clock Tower, yeah.
Clock Tower, by the Clock Tower.
It's not good. It's not good. Centre of town, and
And the people I met a green councillor recently in Brighton, and I was talking to him. But what about the people on the streets? And he said, "Oh, we've got out of the top 10 now." I said, "What are you talking about? You're the 11th largest bloody thing of people on the streets. No wonder you've got a lousy reputation. You're about as green as a red tomato, as far as I can see."
Yeah. No, it's a problem, unfortunately.
Isn't it? I mean, Brighton's become a sort of Sodom and Gomorrah, isn't it? Really?
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of things happening. Obviously, it's not immune from the whole retail revolution. There's kind of online shopping, closure of shops, and that. There's parts of like Western Road that aren't very good. There's other parts further on. I mean, Hove, Church Road is okay. Centre of town does attract a lot of people who've got problems and stuff like that, and in some respect, and some of them obviously are clearly either mentally ill or so stuffed up with stuff that they act as if they are. And sometimes we don't go out that much at night, actually. I'm not particularly scared or anything like that, but there's pockets that you would prefer to avoid at times, and in the centre of town. So
it's funny. I do have this hate-love relationship because I loved the time when I was there in the 60s, early 60s, and I like the idea of the Graham Greens breeding, the seediness and the naughtiness and all that kind of thing.
yeah.
But recently we was in Brighton to do various things, and I went to the Horse and Hounds, which is a pub I always liked, a 60s jukebox, and I just felt back again. I think there. And unfortunately, the jukebox is now broken down. And I'm my heartbroken about it.
Oh God.
I really like, the memories of
Yeah.
those days. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's still. I mean, the North Lanes is very interesting.
The race is terrific, isn't it, the North Lanes? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or I should
yeah.
say the North Lane, no S on the end. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. But I've still got a lot to offer, Brian.
Yeah.
And the sun shines a lot. Shining at the moment, actually.
I like Kemptown as well, don't you?
Yeah, Kemptown's.
It
Yeah.
reminds me of Greenwich Village in New York somehow, at the upper reaches of it.
Oh, right. Okay. I don't know Greenwich Village. No. I have.
Anyway,
Anyway, no, I won't go into another story now. It's
it's great. Thanks very much for doing this.
all right. No
Love to see
problem.
you.
All right.
See you soon, I hope. Ciao.
Christmas, yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Hang on. So that was Bob Davis. That was a very nice interview.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly go to scenes in Sussex for a quick breather, and we'll get everything set back up and talk to you for the last 20 minutes. So
No,
here we
I
go.
can't. I've got to go.
Oh, you got okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's why we're going to a clip. Sure.
Okay.
All right.
No, I've
So
got
do you want
go.
to say goodbye
Yeah.
if you're leaving?
I've got to leave now, everybody. Thanks very much for watching this, and hope to talk to you again quite soon. Thanks very much.
All right. Well,
Bye.
Stuart will be going, but me and Keith will join you in a moment. So here we go. All right, so welcome back to Mirador Television. It's me and Keith here. Stuart is on his way now. Goodbye,
Yeah.
Stuart.
I fell asleep and you come and woke me up because he's decided to get back off early.
You see this?
He's got an easy life, this man. An easy life.
This tag here is for hitting people on the head with. So you won't watch it. See you later.
Okay, my boy. Take it easy for the rest of the day. It's cold out there.
All right, so that was an interesting interview that they had there.
Indeed, it does.
So,
and actually, it's rather nice that it is the university's anniversary. And actually, strangely enough, I remember the announcement that there would be a university here. And I remember the early days. It was a really communist-inspired student hotbed. It had a very interesting start. And as I said, I knew one of the early Leslie Fielding. I think became Sir Leslie Fielding. and he actually had many a funny story himself. I think I don't want to put somebody in the grave too soon, but I do think that Leslie Fielding died just a short while ago. A very interesting man and interesting choice of vice chancellor. Right. So where are we looking at? Lives put at risk and patients abandoned.
So we have two stories here. We got one from the papers here in the Daily Mail, but I got one from the Guardian here, which I wanted to go through.
Okay.
Eddie Izzard failed to become Labour MP. He was put. Do you know who Eddie Izzard is? The comedian.
He's a comedian, isn't he? Yeah.
Eddie Izzard, right? You know him?
I'm aware of him. Yeah, absolutely.
So he was put on an all-women shortlist to become a Labour MP.
An all-women shortlist?
Yes.
Right.
Because Eddie Izzard is a woman.
Oh, really?
Not really, but yes, he's a woman. He's a woman. But he was put on a all-women's shortlist for Sheffield Central and failed to become a Labour MP. I would have liked to have seen him as a Labour MP because I just think that it would have been funny more than anything.
Well, I mean, they've got a bunch of clowns up there. As it is, one more wouldn't have made any difference, would it?
No, it really wouldn't. But yeah, God, it's ridiculous. He was put on an all-women shortlist.
Yeah,
because he is a woman.
Well, you know my view of these shortlists that specify it must be a woman, it must be a man, it must be a gay or whatever. Yeah. Is that they are rubbish. They do not do us any good whatsoever.
No, I know.
What we want is people who can be good and effective MPs, and I don't care what they are. They can be three-legged as far as I'm concerned, but they must be capable of being MPs. And the parties, this is where all the political parties have let us down badly. I now have very little respect left for any political party.
Well, yeah, Liz Truss was bragging that this is her Conservative cabinet was there wasn't a single white straight male in the entire cabinet, and that's a Conservative party.
Well, look what happened to her.
It failed very quickly.
Yes, and I mean that sort of thinking should disappear from politics.
I'm sure those two things weren't related, and it was just a coincidence.
No, I bet you they were related. The thinking is that we must have a bit of this and a bit of that. I'm sorry, this is serious stuff. These are our leaders. This is making decisions that affect thousands and thousands and thousands of people. It affects our country. I don't want somebody there because they're a ratio. I want them there because they are good at their job. I don't give a damn whether they're all coloured. Oh, no, we're not supposed to say that, are we? All black. Okay. I don't care if all 650 of them are black, as long as the 650 can do the job. But they're not chosen that way. They're chosen because of their colour. Nobody asks whether they can do the job. And as a matter of fact, the attitude that is taken by the political parties, of the backbenchers particularly, is just making up numbers. It's not good enough. It is not good enough. And the whole thing, the reason that we are in this mess is because of the political parties. And if there is ever an argument against democracy, this is it. We really are displaying all the bad things about democracy. And the Russians and the Chinese are probably sitting back in their palaces and giggling like hell at the way that we're getting ourselves into a mess because we're playing into their hands. But there's no sense in me rabbiting on. I don't have the decision. I don't have the opportunity to change things. But I'll tell you one thing is, if they don't change soon, I can see the whole house of cards, pack of cards, come tumbling down. And good for Eddie Izzard.
Do you think that it's inevitable for the house of cards to fall? Do you think it's going to happen?
I think yes. I think it's already happening.
I think it is. I think it will, absolutely 100%. I have no doubt in my mind about this.
The trouble is, I have no idea of what's going to take its place. No.
I know a lot of people who have the viewpoint of accelerationism. Do you know that the idea of that?
What's
Accelerationism?
Well, I know what accelerate means, but in what context?
Abuse the system to make it fall quicker.
Oh, well, I'm sure that there are lots of people, because they actually think that the vacancy, the power vacuum, is that they can take advantage of. Look at history, the people that want to make it fall. Look at history, right? The Bolsheviks thought that they were going to take over Russia, right? They actually conspired against the royal family. They toppled them, and what happened is they soon got toppled themselves, and the communists took over. And the Bolsheviks did all the work for them. The communists took over. Well, that's exactly what happens. Is there are other people who don't make too much noise, who are sitting in the wings waiting for you to topple the system so that they can move in.
I'm not saying in a revolutionary sense.
Oh, why not?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I'm saying why not? Why aren't you saying it in a revolutionary sense?
Because I don't want a revolution.
Well, then maybe not.
But I think the government is going to collapse in on itself, and it has to be rebuilt. And I know a lot of people. I'm sympathetic to this idea of, well, just use the system as much as you can, abuse it until it collapses.
Yes,
because we don't have.
You are assuming you're making a basic assumption that if the system collapses, that the vacuum that's created will actually be filled the way that you think it will. What I'm saying to you and to anybody else who wants to see
how it will be filled.
Exactly. And what happens if there is a little group of people who have been conspiring so that they can take over and bring in an authoritarian regime?
Yeah, that could easily happen, just as the other way. Yeah, just as any other way.
I mean, in Russia, the middle class, who are leading a fairly nice life, thank you very much, is one day they were leading a fine life, the next day they were actually making soap to survive. Now that can happen if a system collapses. I would rather see that we got some decent people and some competent people back into the system we've already got.
Well, yeah, they already are eroding the middle class.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, just look at the tax issue. I mean, Stuart was, a couple of weeks ago, he was getting taxed 20%. It jumped to 40%.
Yeah.
That is the erosion of the middle class. Exactly. That is the most blatant example that I could give.
You see, we've got people who is the one thing that has got to stop is they've got to stop living in the bubble, the Westminster bubble. They have no idea what life is like. I mean, one of the things I would like to see.
I think that's as likely as reform.
We don't know what's likely. But if we're going to talk reform of any sort, one of the things I'd like to do is to see that anybody who stands as an MP must have worked in the real world for 5 years. So that they know what working is like.
I mean, most politicians are career politicians. They've been in the system their entire lives. I've been thinking about becoming a politician, but what's the point? You have to go through the party system.
Oh, exactly.
You do have to do all the favors, and you have to put yourself in these compromised positions. And once you get to the power to really affect change, look what we have against you.
Uh-huh.
And it's too late. They've dragged you through the machine, the party machine.
I think all prospective candidates should also select some key people in their constituency and buy them beer every night for a year. And I'm quite happy to be the person that you buy beer for. Make an assessment.
Maybe. One idea I have heard, which I think is a very, very good idea, is getting rid. When you have the ballots, it says the letter of the party next to it. Conservative, Labour. When you go to the ballots, I think it should just say the names. So it's because most people.
That's another good idea. I approve of that.
Most people go to the voting office and say, "Where's Labour? Where's Labour? Vote. Where's Conservative? I'll vote for them." They don't know who. They don't know who Mims Davey is. They don't know who the local MPs are.
No, there is one slight danger with that, and that is that a number of people vote for somebody because they think he's a very nice person, And if you don't know what they're standing for, is perhaps that would increase. It is there's a downside.
Well, that's the thing.
Absolutely everything.
Well, there is obviously, but that's the thing. You have to look at the politicians themselves and do some research, basic research.
But I think that the revolution, if you like, the reform should start at the local level. There should be no politics in Lewes Council. There shouldn't be any politicians there. This lot that we've got in at the moment are disgusting. They're all working to political agendas. I don't want you to work to a political agenda. I want you to look after this town for me. And what did you do? You gave it away. You gave it away to the neighbouring community. And now we're not being run by our own people. We're being run by people down the road. That's what you did with your politics and your party politics.
Why did they do it?
I mean, it all sounded so wonderful. It was going to save money and so on and so forth. And there were 1,000 reasons. What it was a bunch of idiots who once again had no experience of what life was like. And the fact is that now that it's done, you see, nobody will never admit that they made a mistake. And then what you've got is you've got a chief executive who, do you know what he was before he became chief executive?
Yeah.
Computer executive. He's a computer man. That's what we're being run by at the moment. And you know my view of computers, right? Yeah. But so what we've got is a computer man running this whole thing, and it's a disaster, an absolute disaster. And we've got a scrutiny committee that doesn't scrutinize. Is this lot, this Rainbow Coalition, or whatever you want to call them, they were absolutely adamant that the cabinet system is iniquitous, which it is. And boy, were they going to change it. They're in power now. They've been in power, what, 4 years, almost 4 years? Did they do anything to change it? No.
Well, it's just like the Conservative Party. They've been in charge for 13 years now, the majority of my entire life. And what do they have to show for it?
Yeah. We are losing faith in you. And if in fact you think that we're being unkind and we're yelling at you and you're saying, oh, but look at all the things we do. I do look at the things that you do. And you're a waste of space. You know, what you really do is nothing. You don't even do your job as a councillor or whatever terribly well. Oh, you ponce around and you put out statements, but you do exactly the same thing as the big boys do in Westminster. You say, oh, look, we've allocated this money to the... No, you don't. You recycle it. You take from Peter to pay Paul, but you don't tell us that you've taken from Peter. So we think you put millions into this project. We're not apprised of the fact that you took a few million out to go to another project, saying that project had got new funding or it was a new initiative. It is absolutely appalling, the system that we're living under. And once you're there, and you are there, do you ever suggest that there should be change? No, absolutely not. Because you think that you've got us by the nose, and you have at the moment. But to tell you, my nose is beginning to get very sore because it's being tugged by you. And I am not going to give up trying to persuade people to take a second look or to support perhaps a revolution. And do you know something, Max? Modern life is going to get so tough, and it's going to get 10 times tougher than it is at the moment. This might be the catalyst to make people think twice about how we govern. It might just. On the other hand, what we might probably do is we get people moaning and groaning, not realizing that they're contributing to their own downfall.
I will say, and I do stand by this, the one thing that really does annoy me is people who complain endlessly about politics but don't vote.
Oh, yeah, no, that's right.
That does get on my nerves.
Well, local politics, we only get about 30% of the polls. National politics, we get about 70%. It should really be nearer to 90%. There will always be some people who won't vote for a variety of reasons, but it should be close to 90%. There should be a turnout. And actually, local politics is quite influential. They have quite a lot to say or do about how we live locally.
and that's 30% of the population. That's anybody locally who decides to moan and groan is they should actually hang their heads in shame because they don't go to the polls.
Right. Well,
we ran out of time.
It's 11 o'clock.
What a pity! I was just enjoying myself.
Well, thank you for joining me for the last part of the show. And me and Stuart had an all right show. We didn't have a lot of time together. He had his guests, but we did talk about some interesting things.
Yeah, no, it's been a good morning. I think we've covered a lot of ground from the time that we got in here at 8:30 this morning. Or got in here. We get in here at 7:15.
Oh, I got in late.
Oh, you were a bit late this morning. Your alarm didn't go up, but you were here on time. It was all right.
Yeah.
But let me reiterate: we broadcast from the White Hart Hotel, right in the centre of Lewes. And when we come in the morning, we get here at about 7:10. The fire is crackling, the coffee is ready, and it's all because of the front of house staff at the White Hart. They are by far the best hotel staff I've ever come across. They are fantastic. Jane and Shannon and Wes, and they look after us. And there's the houseman looked after my spectacles. Kevin. And then Sally is here, the owner or the wife of the owner, a joint owner. And Cliff drops by and has a little chat. We were talking yesterday about how brave he is because he actually goes out and gives a stirrup cup to the huntsman on Boxing Day with howling mobs who don't dare show their face, but who are ready to actually cause as much trouble as they can. So we are very fortunate. We are very fortunate in how we start our day. At this stage, we start to get a bit tired. Toodle pip.
All right. Thank you very much for watching.